I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Special episode today highlighting 3 renegade women. This compilation is in honor of International Women's Day, which is this Thursday, March 8th. I'll be in New York City giving a keynote talk for Ernst & Young's International Women's Day event, and you can catch my speech live on Facebook at 12 noon Eastern. Go to facebook.com/EY, and again, this is Thursday, March 8th. During my talk, I'll share my journey and specifically how we can put ideas into action and continue to press for progress when it comes to women's social, economic, cultural, and political equality. Today on the show, we have Jessica Alba, actress and founder of The Honest Company, which has been valued at more than $1 billion. We also have Paralympian snowboard champion Amy Purdy, who is in South Korea now competing during the Paralympic Games. And we also have Maureen, who was the youngest managing director ever on Wall Street. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Purdy. Yep, the original before you go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Purdy have literally taken the smell out of you know what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit purdy.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code WHYNOTNOW. That's all one word. Also, you can now get Purdy at Target. In this first clip, Jessica Alba talks about building her billion-dollar empire, how she decides where to focus her time, and her personal approach to social media.
You can only set yourself up for so much, and I think being independent and self-reliant and being fulfilled as a person is like the number one thing. And I think since I was very small, since I can remember, I knew I always wanted to work on myself and I wanted to have a purpose, literally since I can remember. So 3 to 5, I was like, I'm gonna do something with my life, and I wanna have a purpose, and I want to be meaningful in whatever I do. And I didn't want to just be another sort of person floating in the world or going through the motions. And that was important to me, even at such a young age. For whatever reason, I don't know where that drive came from. I think part of it is nurture, but it's probably a lot of nature. It's just in me. And then nurture, and like someone like my mom, who just was always kind of rebellious and not afraid to try things, that encouraged me and allowed me to think beyond, sort of the boundaries of my reality. So I just think in life, I always kind of approach things with like, do the work and put in the work to set yourself up for luck or chance or for things to come together. And if you want something in life, kind of work towards that. I mean, you can't, like, if I wanted to start The Honest Company right when I wanted to start it, I would have started it 4 years before I started it. and it wouldn't have been the right timing because the marketplace wasn't ready for it. And I wasn't emotionally ready for it either. I needed to go through painful times and rejection and refinement as a person and as a leader and as a business person to even get to the point to start a startup. I think you want something immediately and you want instant gratification, but sometimes it's sort of like those learning moments are the moments, and it's more about the journey than anything, and you have to enjoy the journey. When I was acting full time, I always sort of felt like I was as good as my last job, and my future was always so in flux, and it was so unpredictable, and I just felt so vulnerable. But when I started taking the approach, after I had my daughter, I really kind of switched my mentality of just being in the moment and enjoying the journey. I can't predict the outcome. I'm not in control of every single facet, but what I am in control of is my own personal happiness. I am in control of how I treat people, how I treat myself, how I interact with the world, how conscientious I am. And if I work on those things that are in my control, then things that are out of my control don't feel as unbearable, when unpredictable things happen. But when good things happen, I feel like I'm ready for them.
I have so many awesome takeaways from that. And thank you for also kind of sharing that. I didn't realize that you had the concept and the idea for The Honest Company 4 years prior. And that could probably really help some people right now who are thinking, they want to do something right now, but maybe it's just not the right time. And not only it's not the right, market, but also you personally need to go through things. And that question, when to make things happen versus let things happen, I've always kind of thought of it as a little bit of a one or the other, black and white. Sometimes I hit home runs and sometimes I crash and fall when I try to make things happen. But I really appreciate you talking about how you tee it up, you do everything you can, and then at some point you got to kind of let the universe decide what's going to happen next. And I appreciate that. So before hopping on with you, earlier today I asked on Twitter, I'm getting ready to speak with you. Does anyone have any questions? And this one individual said, yeah, how can I be her? And I thought, at first I kind of laughed and I thought, yeah, who doesn't want to be beautiful, successful entrepreneur, movie star, awesome family? And then I thought, wait, my guess is she would actually really want you to be yourself, of course. But then it occurred to me, on social media, we're so conditioned to show our highlight reels versus real life. And if we look at just that, the polished exterior, then it's just not real, right? Like, you have a lot that goes on in your world that's not necessarily going to be things you're sharing on Instagram and Twitter and so on and so forth. How do you feel like we can continue to keep it real on social without kind of creating facades? Because so many people, I think, mistake what's real and what isn't.
I think it's a bit of a balance. I don't like to share all my business with people, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And, I have a therapist that I go to deal with stuff when I'm going through tough times. And I don't think that, the world is educated enough to deal with what I'm going through on a personal level when it comes to certain challenges. Some people really like reaching out to the world and sharing all of their business and their hardships. And that's fine. I think there's all different kinds of people. And I think that's what makes, the world interesting, is we're not all the same and we're not robots. So just for me personally, I don't need to share my dirt with people. I feel like people know enough about me.
Yeah, and I didn't mean that at all. You come across very real on social, regardless of what you're doing.
Is it all like sunshine and rainbows? Hell no. But it would be naive of anyone to think that my life was just handed to me and I just woke up and it all was this. I definitely grew up with hardships, and it's that chip on my shoulder that made me successful. that forced me to kind of think outside the box and pave my own way and overcome challenges, because if I didn't do it for myself, no one was handing me a life of privilege or charm or success. And so I had to create it for myself. Where does that come from? I don't know. I think some of it is nature and some of it's nurture. I know I keep going back to that, but you either got the grit and the hustle and the creativity and the fearlessness to like do things that aren't comfortable, or you don't. And I don't think that it's wrong if you don't. I think it's more important that you know what you're good at, know what you're not good at, know what gets you up in the morning and excites you to be alive. That stuff is more important than, I guess, projecting onto someone else's reality your perception.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's actually an awesome transition into a question, and then we can hop into a couple rapid fire questions. But knowing what you're good at and what, maybe what you aren't, a mentor of mine once said, as a lesson that I've learned from him when it comes to being an entrepreneur and being focused, he said, figure out what you're uniquely qualified to do and do that, and then try to find a way to delegate or find other resources or something to do the other things. And we can't do that right away out of the gate. But right. What do you feel like you're uniquely qualified to do at The Honest Company?
Oh, gosh. It's hard because it's hard to think of yourself in that way, especially when sometimes I get so in the weeds. But I think I'm good at, because I don't have the history of the way things should be done or have been done, or I'm not bogged down with process or learning that or growing up with that. I always have like creative ways to get through challenges, and I think outside the box. And I think when you start a company, and even in running a company, you need to rely heavily on process and people to get things done, but sometimes those ways don't always help you get through all the challenges. No two issues are the same or challenges are the same, and so I can kind of apply a more outside the box creative. And I also I see the big picture always. I don't get bogged down in what's right in front of me. I'm always looking. I'm already at the finish line, and I actually am excited about the journey. Where sometimes people just really need to know what their task is in the here and now, and what am I doing today, and am I chipping away at it? And they're very those kind of people. And so I surround myself with a lot of those people because that's not what I'm good at. I'm good at big vision, context, perspective. Pulling yourself kind of out of the weeds and seeing the finish line and the point to all of it.
Well, and I respect the fact that just I can tell by researching and listening and seeing what I can learn online about your involvement with your company, you're not just the face. You obviously are very involved and know and have learned, everything you need to learn to do that, to be able to set the vision. And well, in many cases, the best leaders have that nonlinear philosophy and can see it before it's there. So, props to you for doing what you're doing. I'm very impressed. To listen to the entire episode with Jessica Alba, head to episode 61 on iTunes, Spotify, or visit amyjomartin.com/Why Not Now, Jessica Alba. In this next clip, Paralympian Amy Purdy shares the story of losing both of her legs and how she navigates through uncomfortable situations.
I grew up in Las Vegas. I was really active. I was never an athlete growing up, but I was a snowboarder. And I loved snowboarding. It's what I did. It's what my friends did. I became a massage therapist so that I could travel the world and snowboard and have this job that would travel with me. So I could basically become, I guess, a professional ski bum, but not have to live off of my parents' money. And so I ended up, just kind of long story short, I got this great job in Vegas, as a massage therapist. So I was working, I was saving money, I was loving my life. I was only 19 years old, and I was making great money and saving up to travel and just had these big plans for myself. And I ended up coming down with something called meningococcal meningitis. It was something that hit me in an instant, completely sideswiped me, and I was in the hospital fighting for my life for 3 months, and my life completely changed from that point forward. So let me see. I'm kind of skipping around just a little bit, but very long story short, I ended up going on and snowboarding again, creating these legs to snowboard in, and I knew I had a story that I wanted to share. I think that we're always going to have doubts when we're stepping out of our comfort zone. So there's multiple examples of my life. Just recently, just in the fall, I danced for the opening ceremonies for the Paralympic Games, and 200 million Brazilians alone watched this dance, and then hundreds of millions of people were going to watch it around the world, and NBC was covering it live here in the US. And when they approached me to dance in the opening ceremonies, I was once again incredibly fearful, because I thought, oh my gosh, this is so huge, so many people are watching, and what if I mess up? What if I don't know how to dance that well? Yes, I did Dancing with the Stars, but I danced with Derek Huff, one of the best dancers in the world. And I was dancing with him the entire time. And I was being asked to dance solo in the opening ceremony for the games. And so it was definitely one of those moments where this is a kind of an opportunity. And although part of me was loving the idea because I love dancing and moving, and I knew what it could mean to so many people, and just to be able to express myself, what it would mean for me. But at the same time, my brain was telling me, this is really scary. You may actually make a fool of yourself. You may not know what you're doing at all, and you're putting yourself out there. And I battled with that quite a bit. I actually turned it down initially, because
Wow, really?
I just thought, yeah, because even though I've done all types of, I did Dance with the Stars, and I've done all types of different big performances and stuff, I just was really fearful of, I did well on Dancing with the Stars. I don't want to ruin it now. I don't want people to now watch this and say, oh, she doesn't actually know what she's, yeah, exactly. Well, like, she doesn't know what she's doing unless she's with Derek Huff. I mean, that was really scary for me, because, he's amazing. And I wanted to show that I could do this on my own, but I also had no idea. And so I remembered, though, that was the same feeling I had going into Dancing with the Stars. Dancing with the Stars, I was so scared at first that I would make a fool out of myself. I talked to everybody in my family, talked to my friends, and said, I just don't know. I don't know if I should do this, because what if I can't do this? What if I'm going into these things trying to figure out the possibilities and share that with the world. That is my reasoning and motivation for challenging myself publicly and doing these things, is to figure out what's possible for myself, but what's possible for others as well. And yet there's that other side that's always saying, but what if you fail? But what if you fail and you actually show that you're not that good, that you're not that capable? And I took this responsibility on, and always have, that I'm not just representing myself, I'm representing anybody out there who has a challenge and has a dream and wants to overcome, their challenges and meet their dreams. I represent people who have disabilities, who get looked down upon, and I'm out there showing what you can do. So I hope I do well here, because I really want to show what's possible. And so I have to remind myself every time an opportunity like this comes up, I have to remind myself I feel the same every time. I always have my heart saying yes and my brain saying no. And every time that I've said yes, it's been a life-changing experience, an incredibly positive life-changing experience. And so when I decided I turned down Rio, and they came back a month later, And I kind of just made my mind up where I said, okay, well, what else am I doing over the next year? I mean, really. So I'm scared to do something really big right now. But what's the other options? I'm speaking. Yes, I have, other businesses and things that I'm running and doing, and I'm an athlete. But, what's really, really challenging me over the next year. And when I realized, well, there's really not anything that's pulling me out of my comfort zone. So yes, I'm going to do that and see what happens. And that ended up being one of the most incredible experiences of my life, dancing in front of nearly 100,000 people in the stadium. It was just me and this unbelievable robot. It was this incredibly artistic and creative dance that was put together. I danced for 5 minutes. On Dance with the Stars, I only danced for maybe a minute at a time. It pulled me out of my comfort zone in every way possible. And the people who reached out to me and wanted to share their stories afterwards was unbelievable. Literally, all of Brazil was watching, including all different countries around the world, but all of Brazil was watching. And the next day, I was on the cover of their national newspaper dancing, and the president was impeached that day, and the president was on the second page.
You're bumping the president.
Right.
With positive news.
I know, right? But everywhere I went, people cried and shared their stories and said, thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us this gift. And it ended up being so much bigger and so much more fulfilling, so much more meaningful than I ever could have imagined. And I really easily could have, completely backed out and just not done it at all because I was scared. And so going back to your kind of playbook of when I run into these situations, what steps do I follow? I really just remind myself that every time I've been scared like this, and I've gone for it anyways, it's been a defining moment in my life. And once again, it goes back to I'm being called upon to step up. This is something that's being presented that is going to pull me completely out of my comfort zone. And every time I've done that, I've discovered something more about myself, or I've met amazing people, or I've connected with, other people and their stories. So much good has come out of it. So I have to remind myself every time I'm scared, it really means that I really care. It really means that I really do want to do this. I'm just scared because my brain is getting in the way. And I think that's what happens a lot of the time. We just get in our own way and we stop ourselves from doing what it is that we are, destined or capable of doing.
Absolutely. And it sounds too like it's become a part of your operating system. And one of the things we talk a lot about on this show is kind of graduating into bigger and bigger why not nows. So kind of also thinking of it as if we get comfortable with being uncomfortable, then there's always a next level of being uncomfortable, and you have to keep pushing up. But that's great advice for everyone, really. To listen to the entire episode with Amy Purdy, head to episode 36 on iTunes, Spotify, or visit amyjomartin.com/why not now Amy Purdy. This last clip is with Maureen Sherry. She talks about her experience working in the bro culture on Wall Street and the book she wrote titled Opening Bell.
Amy, I just feel like at very difficult times when you have a very important decision to make, I used to try to make lists, pro and con, or weigh certain bullet points on my list with a certain number, and then add them up and see which decision made more sense. But I will say that in every one of my big decisions, I really had to just sort of throw out the list and go inside and make it a gut decision. And oftentimes those decisions weren't the most practical. there aren't any of them that I've really looked back on and regretted. So going to the earliest part of my career, I have to say, right out of college, I could have gone to a more mainstream job, being in a investment banking program, where your career is sort of very methodically laid out for you, and you're with a lot of people your age, and you're going to be in New York City, and that sounds great. Or I had this opportunity to go and work for a very tiny money management firm on the West Coast, where I would get to live in suburban San Francisco and have no friends and not be in any sort of formal training. But the pull for me was to be in the outdoors and to kind of have to struggle a little bit more, to sort of have a career that I would have to really be asking for help. I knew, to get other people I worked with to explain things to me, to be in I had never even been to California before that, and to have to be more, it would be more of a struggle and more of a challenge for me. And yet I was intrigued by being so uncomfortable and to be so, maybe in a place where I would just get to have to stretch myself more. So getting back to the original question, being brave is always something that I just try to even say to myself, is this a time where I should just be brave and let go and let's see what happens? Because so many of our decisions in life are reversible. It's not like you will never have a great job opportunity again if you don't take this particular one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think that helped me. So yeah, I moved to the West Coast and for 2 years lived like a hermit because I had to work East Coast hours on the West Coast. So I had to be at work at 4:30 in the morning.
The market's open and you've got that. Yeah.
That's right. The market's open and everyone I worked with, was older and had children. So I had no friends and I do like people. So that was also a challenge, but I got very introspective in that time. I, spent a lot of time alone and thought a lot about, what I wanted to do next, and also was forced to learn things on my own and to think more deeply about things. And I look back very fondly now at that time of life.
That's a common theme I'm hearing from guests as far as kind of craving that struggle, almost wanting to intentionally put ourselves into positions where we know we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, kind of practicing almost. And that's interesting that you mentioned that. And then also the pro and con list versus gut. How many times we all do that where we're making this list. In one case, I remember even making an Excel spreadsheet with a friend who had a big decision to make. And it was this matrix and we had formulas and financials, but also this kind of rating system of risk and so on and so forth. And then we ended up going on a walk later. And I said, you really just want to do this, right? And go this route and make this decision. And she said, yeah. I said, okay, let's forget about the matrix then. At least we went through the process.
Delete that spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I feel like, I do think our subconscious sometimes just knows what we want to do and we battle with that. And so, letting go a little bit. I do have friends too who micromanage certain things in their life. And I think it leads to great unhappiness because on paper they're seeing, well, this should have been the sum of the event. This should have been what happened afterward. And if it doesn't work out exactly as that Excel spreadsheet, led you to, then there's great frustration. Whereas if you go with things a little bit more, I think it's positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you decided to write this book, and for listeners who maybe haven't read the book or are thinking about it, it's so entertaining and also very revealing. There are times when you really show a glimpse behind the curtain of what went on the trading floor and kind of what your experience was. What was that moment like when you decided to write it? Because I've read a little bit about there wasn't a non-disclosure agreement. Is that correct?
That's right. And so when I left, I was asked to sign a non-disclosure, and the wink of that is that you're going to accept a check. And so I remember saying to the person that I was handed this non-disclosure from, why would I sign this? What do you think I would say about this place that would be so negative? Because there was no climax. There was no like big scene where I said, oh, I'm quitting. It was more just like this ebb of discontent and, kind of lack of passion for the job anymore, when I felt like so much of my future had been sort of decided for me once I became a mom. And I saw this not just for me, but for the women who surrounded me. And so it was a little bit, hard to not accept that check. But I said to her, this woman, I said, well, how by me accepting this money, does it help women coming behind me? And so we sort of left it at that. And then even after I left, my fax machine would wake up in the middle of the night back when we had fax machines, and it would be a sweetened offer. And so I didn't leave with the intention of writing a book. I just left with an intention of some higher ground on this whole thing. And so I went to graduate school then to receive an MFA. And I just started writing short, like nonfiction essays about work and about the environment I worked in. And one professor turned to me one day and said, Maureen, this is highly entertaining, but this is a nonfiction class. And I said, well, this is nonfiction. And it just sort of underscored to me how hyperbarically sealed Wall Street is. And a lot of it has to do with the law. You sign an arbitration agreement when you start working on Wall Street. And that just says if you ever have an issue with the firm, you settle it in-house. And that's why these stories have been untold for so long. And because people like me, generally there's a check exchanged, a non-disclosure is signed, and that's the end of it. So I thought I had a unique opportunity because of that. And also, I didn't want to write it. I thought about doing it as complete nonfiction, but my intention was never to get anybody in trouble or to name names. It was more to just speak about an industry as a whole, an industry that I think can actually do quite a lot of good in the world and helps businesses every day, but has, because of all the secrecy, has a lot of things that go on that shouldn't go on. So I'm a big fan of making things more transparent, and this book was a way to do that.
Well, and I think you're achieving your goal if you're being asked to come in and share your story to the exact audience that you used to work within, right? So it has to feel really productive in not only sharing your story, but also getting that interest from the individuals and just entities where you feel that, the story is probably going to be the most impactful. So that's awesome. And I mean, the quote, by accepting this check, how is this going to help women behind me? If that isn't the most badass statement I've ever heard, I mean, look at you.
Felt really good, but it was an expensive statement.
It was expensive, but I think is it in your Twitter bio that says sometimes the cost of money is too much?
Yes.
That's really kind of a mirror of that statement. And it's amazing what you've done here. And it's so important to tell your story. And it's not just for, like you said, hey, calling people out, this and that. It's more of just, hey, if we can be more open and generate more awareness about these things that are going on, that always have been going on, then we can evolve and shift them and accelerate that process of women breaking through. And thank you. So I just can't thank you enough.
You're welcome. But I also feel like, there are many other women who are doing great things in this area also. And so I feel like, also opening up the dialogue about women and financial literacy. I just want to cry when I see that so many more women than men retire into poverty, or, with women now being primary and sole breadwinner in many households, that, where does this lead us down the line if Wall Street and finance and investing is still something that's almost sort of taboo to women or seen as being maybe unfeminine, or where women are so underrepresented. So my hope is that this is just one little cog in a wheel of a movement towards greater transparency in finance and for more literacy for all people. Like so many financial instruments are needlessly complicated, I think. So many women who are completely bright and hardworking, don't know how to invest or where to even start. Hopefully a kind of user-friendly book that doesn't really get into too much of the detail of it is just another way for them to familiarize themselves with this.
And there were times where I had to remind myself that this is a real story. Someone lived this, and then just the comments, like when colleagues would ask you, "How long are you going to keep this kid job thing going?" Those meant that, different mentions and specific stories at the holiday party with your child's gift being thrown around, kind of in the mosh pit. Does one come to mind that you can share with us? Because there are so many, and there are these moments where it's just like, wait, that really happened?
Yeah, I've been more amazed by the feedback to the book and the stories that were shared with me, and some of them being far more outrageous than anything I even experienced. So,
Really?
there's one group of people who say, "Oh, that was never our experience," and I'm happy for them because I do think it is a culture at certain places of work versus others. But I realize that with the feedback that other women experienced completely crazy situations and because of job security, never had a place to speak up about it. And so hearing their stories really sort of empowered me. So to your question though, there were some things deleted from the book that were very upsetting, and my editor felt you wanted to see that story through because it was so almost distracting to the storyline. And there were things like the trading floor. It had a stuffed animal. It was a beaver that had, sexual connotation to it. And whoever had like a very large trade, the beaver would go flying over women's heads to land in the desk of whomever had this big win. And it would sort of sit there as a trophy, if you will. And, is it harassment? No. Is it like a fraternity house? Yes. And so then the question is, do you feel like you're on the outside looking in if that's where you work? Like, how are you ever going to succeed when you're not even part of the core group there? Not
Right.
that you particularly want to be. So, but, and as far as other stories go, there were a lot of stories that were shared with me about, hotel rooms, keys showing up on women's desks, and with the implication that it could mean, a help in their job or things like that. So these are many things too that, I also wondered, like, is this book dated? My experience is a decade old. And when I went around to interview women who have the job that, I had, I felt like, I can't believe this story still rings true today.
That's something I've thought a lot about too in reading this and then preparing to speak with you. Thinking back to a few things in my past and would I have done things differently now? And one of the things that came to mind was I worked in an ad agency about 15 years ago, one of my first jobs out of college. And we had this creative director who was total stud, a little bit older, but he was straight from Mad Men days on Madison Avenue in New York. And he was a pretty famous creative director, and but very old school. And on Halloween, he dressed up as a male chauvinist pig. So with a pig nose and a whip and the whole thing. So he jokingly then proceeded to snap his whip at a college student intern on the butt who was dressed up as a sassy nurse, and she was my intern. And she came to me and she was crying and she was asking for advice. And she was considering going to HR. And what I told her was she needed to learn how to play the game. And if anything like that ever happened again, tell him directly to his face that that's inappropriate. And he'll be shocked that you spoke up to him. But I advised her, don't take this to HR because I think it will backfire on you. And And he has so much influence and power that you may not get the job that you want here. And now I think back to that advice and I kind of cringe, of course, and I think, shit, would I have said something differently if I could go back? And honestly, I don't know. There have been so many times in my career where I kind of just felt like I had to play the game. It wasn't that hard, and I didn't feel, and many times, it's just part of the process. But you shouldn't have to. But I didn't really even think about it at the time because I just thought, well, this is the way it is. And I had to kind of just do it the man's way, be, and even overcorrect and kind of be a much more bulldogish and rough around the edges. But what are your thoughts on that now? Do you notice as you go back and speak with some of the individuals who have the position that you used to, do you think that still rings true, that they feel they need to be that way, or is that shifting?
Yeah, I think the team player is always applauded, in an environment like that. And so if you're going to be the squeaky wheel, you're right. You'll be ostracized. And so I feel like younger women than myself were more, this was something that was more discussed and they were more sensitive to anything that was disparaging or anything in their workplace that they felt was harassment. And yet, so they know this, and I will say the men too have been more schooled or more educated in this than, say, the Mad Men days. But it's interesting to me how most places now, many large workplaces have harassment seminars or some sort of workshops once or twice a year. It's just kind of amazing to me that it does still exist at all, because it's not like something that, your male chauvinist pig example had not, he wasn't coming out of left field. He knew on some level that it was not right for him to behave that way. And yet it still happens. And I think it does happen because he feels quite powerful. He probably brought a lot of money into your ad agency, so that he feels a little bit empowered. He's a big shot and she's a lowly intern. And so I do think it still happens. I think it's more covert maybe than it used to be. I got great examples from an arbitration lawyer who was able to share the details of several cases that he represents. And I think your intern's experience were very, very, very common. And I think that many women like yourself, and I have to admit myself too, would have given the same advice. If you want to stay here, if you want to do well here, you kind of have to just suck it up.
So much of this conversation we're having, I encourage men to listen to, especially men in leadership positions, because the last thing that I want to happen, and I believe probably you too, is just, this is not a bitch session by any means, but if we look at the research and we start to look at the data of strong women leadership and what that does to impact the bottom line, that's usually the conversation that gets the attention of the leaders within companies. And it's all related. And I think just that education element is so key. So I really hope that, we're not tuning out any men in this discussion. But I fear that these type of conversations make that happen.
Yeah. Before we were speaking about transparency, I would just say another thing that I would have added to the intern is, could she go speak to him? Could she say something? I had an example where a woman who worked for me got upset because our trading floor was quite cold. And so she was wearing, I guess, like a silky blouse, and he felt he dropped some Band-Aids on her desk with the implication that she should put these, over her bra so that it wouldn't be obvious to him that she was cold.
Wow.
I know. So she too came to me and said, I'm going to HR. I want to complain about him. And I said, you turn right around and say to him, you should never speak like that. That really makes me feel like the smaller person. And when she called him on it, he did change and he apologized. Mm-hmm. And I felt like he got some respect then from him because she didn't go and complain and fill out paperwork on him. And I think he, was he sort of spanked in a way or punished? In a way, he was, instead of getting angry at her, I think he felt grateful that she brought it to his attention.
And she earned respect, I'm sure, from him.
Respect. And I like the idea of a more junior person saying to, like in your situation, the big boss, an intern speaking up to him and saying, it's just not how it works anymore. And really, it made me feel terrible. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anything, I think that's a key point to take away from that experience. And so let's talk a little bit about where this story and this book is headed, and Reese Witherspoon. What is the future? Is this going to be made into a movie, or is it already? What's the situation there?
So, before the book came out, my agent was able to get it onto Reese Witherspoon's desk. And as you know, she and her business partner, Bruna Papandrea, have a production company, Pacific Standard. And they've made some really great films where women are kind of strong. They can be quirky and imperfect, but it takes you into their lives and helps you to understand their lives better. And they did it with Gone Girl and Wild. And so they read it and she apparently liked it very much. And so she optioned it. And now another thing that usually an author, if they were to be so fortunate as to sell a book, that's sort of the end of the conversation. But I feel really fortunate. The writer, who is from Warner Brothers, has been in touch quite often and really feels they want to get the story right. And so I think that that's just a very exciting thing, that there could possibly be, a movie that does bring this to this story to the big screen and really tries to keep it accurate and not maybe sensational like The Wolf of Wall Street or something that's just so out there that you think, could this ever really happen? So I don't know if it will be in fact a movie, but it's sure looking really good because we've had a number of meetings and the writers come to New York several times. And in fact, we're meeting later today to go over some things because he's in the final pass of a script. So it looks good and it's really exciting. And I can't think of a more perfect person to play Belle than Reese.
To listen to the entire episode with Maureen Sherry, head to episode 12 on iTunes, Spotify, or visit amyjomartin.com/why not now Maureen Sherry. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?